Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome to the messengers in our home. Hello, dear friends of Kardec Radio, and welcome back to the messengers in our home. Tonight we're talking about Chapter 44, Assistance. Hello, Mackenzie.
Hi, Francisca. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another chapter of the messengers in our home.
Let's take a moment to tune ourselves in for the meeting tonight with a prayer, elevating our thoughts to the higher spheres. Dear Mother, Father God, Creator of the universe and of our yet small hearts, we praise you for the beauty of your laws that guide the universe, the perfection of your creation, from the little to the big things. And we thank you for being our Creator as well, for having given us this opportunity in the flesh to learn, to grow, to come closer to you. We thank you to teach us that your will be done, even if it's difficult for us to understand sometimes in our daily life. So we ask you to please help us understand your laws better, and much more important, to practice them in our daily life, opening our hearts, opening our minds, and to learn to stay connected more and more with you and your emissaries, the good spirits, that are diligent helpers, always around, to inspire us, to motivate us. But for the cure to happen, the cure of ourselves, we need to be active. And so we ask you for the strength and the courage to continue on our journey to self-improvement, to our inner reform, to get up whenever we fall, and to keep on moving towards you, steady, step by step. And with your permission, we would now like to ask you to start our meeting, and so be it. Here we are, the reading of Chapter 44. Enjoy.
Chapter 44, Assistance. The picture of suffering unfolding before our eyes reminded me of the environment in the chambers of rectification. Aniceto joined Isidoro and said resolutely, "Let's get to work. Let's apply some energizing passes." "But," I objected, "am I ready for it?" "Why not?" asked my instructor in a firm voice. "Every skill and specialty in the world involving areas of service consists in developing our goodwill. A sincere desire to cooperate and a notion of the responsibility involved are enough for us to begin any new task successfully." Such affirmations were encouraging. I remembered Narcisa, dedicated sister of the unfortunate who had remained in No Solar, almost never resting, like a prisoner of sacrifice. It seemed as though I could still hear her loving sisterly voice. "Andre, my friend, as far as possible, never neglect helping those who suffer. As you stand at your patient's feet, remember that the best medicine is the renewal of hope. If you encounter the failed and hopeless, speak to them of the divine opportunity of the future If someday you are hounded by devious and criminal spirits, don't offer them words of cursing. Encourage, edify, educate, and awaken without harming those who will sleep. God does wonders through deeds of goodwill. With no further ado, I got down to work. Aniceto assigned a group of 6 spirit patients to me, stressing, "Use all your abilities, Andre. With our collaboration, the friends who work in this house will be able to attend to other, more pressing responsibilities." The most insignificant workers for the good rejoice at the opportunity of helping out in ordinary struggles. They build themselves up in the Lord Jesus because not one of their deeds gets lost in time and space. At the moment, I was being called upon to offer real aid. I did not resort to any of my scientific methods or rely only on the techniques of official medicine with which I had been associated in the world. Instead, I remembered the humble and simple Narcisa in the chambers of rectification, a devoted and caring nurse who achieved much more with love than with medication. I approached a deeply disheartened woman, remembering the example of my benevolent friend in No Solar, and knowing that I should help not just by using resolution and energy, but also tenderness and understanding. "My sister," I said, trying to gain her trust, "let's begin with some energizing passes."
Oh,
answered the woman.
I can't see anything. Oh, the trachoma. What a wretch I am. And they talk to me about death, about a different life. How can I get my sight back? I want to see again. I want to see.
"Now just compose yourself," I replied, feeling encouraged. "Don't you trust in the power of Jesus? He still heals the blind, lights our pathway, guides our steps." Only later on did I remember that, at that moment, I had forgotten all about my unwholesome curiosity. I didn't even think about the impression that the trachoma had left on that spirit organism, nor was I concerned about the proper scientific expression of the phenomenon. All I saw in front of me was a suffering and needy sister, and as I became more and more willing to practice fraternal love, a different clarity began to illuminate and warm my face. I remembered the divine influence of Jesus and began the relieving passes over the poor woman's eyes, noticing that an enormous layer of darkness was weighing on her face. I said encouraging things to her. I tied the best essence of my intentions to them and concentrated my magnetic aid abilities on that disturbed area. Within a few seconds, the woman cried out in astonishment.
I can see!
She exclaimed between fear and joy.
God is great! God is great!
And kneeling in an instinctive display of thanks, she asked me,
Who are you, emissary of the good?
I was overcome by a profound emotion that I could not suppress. The goodness of the Eternal One confounded me. Who was I to heal anyone? But the joy of that spirit, freed from darkness, was evidence for an event that I did not want to believe. The light of that gift revealed more strongly the dark depths of my own imperfections. The tears rolled down my cheeks, and I was unable to hold them back in the hidden recesses of my heart. While the spirit patient broke down in tears of praise, I too was absorbed in a wave of new thoughts. The incident had amazed me. I wanted to help the next patient. Nevertheless, I was caught up in an odd inner fascination. Aniceto, however, approached me politely and said in a low voice, Andre, too much regard for results can jeopardize the worker. On occasions like this, vanity usually awakens within us and makes us forget the Lord. Don't forget that all good comes from Him. He is the light of our hearts. We are His instruments in the tasks of love. The faithful servant is not the one who is amazed by the results, nor the one who gets wrapped up in contemplating them, but the one who fulfills the Lord's divine will and moves on. Those words couldn't have been more meaningful. Our kindly mentor returned to his work along with other brothers and sisters, and, in appreciation for his loving advice, I turned to the grateful woman and emphasized, "My friend, thank Jesus, not me. I am merely an obscure servant. Furthermore, don't be too impressed with being able to see outward things. Turn your visual power inward so that you can consecrate the sublime gift of sight to the Lord of life." I noticed that she was taken aback by my words, which perhaps seemed inappropriate and transcendental. But firm again in the understanding of my duty, I approached the next patient. He was an unfortunate brother who had died in Gamboa, a victim of cancer. His entire facial area looked horrible. I applied energizing passes while ministering encouraging thoughts and words, and I noticed that the poor man began to feel considerably better. I promised I would help him check into a spirit home for treatment, recommending that he prepare his mental life to receive such a favorable benefit when the appropriate time came. Next, I attended 2 ex-tuberculosis patients from Encantado, and then a woman who had discarnated in Piedade as a result of a malignant tumor. Then a young man from Olaria who had passed away from shocking during surgery. None of these last 4, however, showed any signs of relief. Their organic ailments and the accompanying psychic phenomena of suffering persisted. When I had finished my allotted task, I joined Aniceto and Vicente, who were waiting for me in a corner of the room. "The activities of assistance," Aniceto explained solicitously, "always proceed just as you have observed here. Some feel that they are healed, while others say they've at least improved, but most seem to continue unreceptive to the aid they have received. What should interest us, however, is the sowing of the good. The germination, growth, blossom and fruit belong to the Lord." Vicente seemed deeply impressed and remarked, "The number of disturbed spirits is frightening. All the way from Nosolar to the earth, we have seen them at varying degrees of imbalance." Aniceto smiled and said in a serious tone, "We owe the overwhelming percentage of such afflictions to the lack of proper religious education. But I'm not referring to the kind that comes from a priest or the mouth of one person to the ears of another. I'm referring to the inner and profound religious education that people systematically deny themselves." Translator's notes. Encantado, Piedade, and Olaria are districts in the north zone of Rio de Janeiro. And tonight we're talking about chapter 44, Assistance. And as you've been following us, we are now going into work with Andre, Vicente, Aniceto, and a lot of other workers, spiritist and spirit workers that are together in Dona Isabel's house. And last week, before the meeting, which was as well the title of the chapter, we had some conversations between Andre and Aniceto about the type of work that they were about to do, and meanwhile they were meeting some friends, some spirit friends, lots of problems, and we had a brief discussion of how unfortunate we are when we, instead of moving on from our difficulties and really striving to do our best, we get stuck within ourselves, not by being an evil necessarily or bad spirit, or having a intentional bad behavior, but because we just don't think forward, and we get stuck in our own mental inabilities, and we become slaves to the idea of illnesses. And then when we discarnate, we have to remember that we are still ourselves, and our habits, our customs, they all come with us. So it's not because we discarnate that we get better just because of that. It's for us to really improve, we need to work on that. So that was more or less basically what we discussed last week. And tonight we're discussing this assistance, which is the title of the book. But it's when we see Andre specifically in action, what he is doing and how he is applying what he learned so far. And Aniceto starts by saying, let's get to work, right? Let's apply some energizing passes. Andre, before that, he says that what he was seeing there reminded him of what he saw in the chambers of rectification. And remember, if any of these terms are not familiar, if you are not familiar with some of these terms, you can always go back to the book No Solar, because most of these terms and how can I say, these room names, these new people that show up here and there, they all are part of Andre's journey in No Solar. And remember, this book that we're reading now, it covers more or less, right, a week in Andre Luiz's life. Although we are taking a year to analyze and to read all these chapters here, all these things happen within a week of work. So it is very interesting to keep reminding ourselves of this. So if you don't understand some of these names, some of these terms, you can always refer back to No Solar, either here at Kardec Radio, or get the book and then do a search on the book, and you will find explanations for many of these terms and terminologies. Here and there, we will stop and explain one of them, but it's very interesting if you can have the book with you and go back and to refer back to it. Even this one, as we repeat from time to time, it would be really, really great if you could have the book The Messengers with you as you read along, as you follow our thoughts and discussions here, so that you can mark and highlight parts and write some notes on the book, and then you can send us comments, you can send us requests or questions, suggestions, so we can keep going and learning together with you. So Aniceto joins Isidoro and says, let's get to work, let's apply some energizing passes. And Andre looks and says, hey, am I ready for it? What are energizing passes in the first place? We explained it before, but here we go again. Passes is this transfusion or transmission of energies that comes from one spirit to the other. We can be incarnate, we can be discarnate. It doesn't make it makes a difference, but it's the techniques are always the same. So it's our magnetism that can be increased by love, by the good spirits who are helping us, and then we are applying these energies to another body, to another person, to another spirit. And that's what Aniceto is asking everybody to do, and to do their part in the job. So although we're going to hear and see only what Andre is doing, and he's in this chapter, you just heard the reading, he takes care of 5 different spirits. But remember, there are lots of other people working there, and he is only one. So he is helping 5. Maybe there are, tens of people there of spirits there doing the same. So they are helping a lot of other spirits who need the help. But he asks, am I ready for it? And again, going back to No Solar, he had the chance to learn how to do it and what to do it there in No Solar. But he's still a little bit shaky, right? He doesn't know yet. Even after a year of training, of working in the chambers of rectification, working with Narcisa, which he will cite in a few minutes here, he is still shaky about it. Can I really do it? Am I ready to do it? It's a different thing than you're in a hospital and then now you're out on a field doing a different type of work. And Aniceto looks at him and says, why not? Anything that we need to do. The first thing is developing our goodwill. If you have the goodwill of doing it, if you want to help, then you're ready to start, right? And that's what Aniceto goes on to say, a sincere desire to cooperate. So, first of all, sincere desire to cooperate. If Andre is there, he really has a desire to cooperate, be it learning, be it doing something physically. He is there, and he wants to help. And a notion of the responsibility involved. Because, and this is very important, it's not only because I want to help and I have the sincere desire to cooperate that I will be able to begin a new task. Because I have to have the idea of how important that job is, a notion of the responsibility involved, right? So if you're taking care of a baby, but you don't have the notion that to take care of a baby, you need to be very careful with everything that you say, with everything that you do. You have to be awakened, aware at all times with what the baby is doing. If you don't still have that notion of responsibility, of how important that job is, so first you need to understand how important that job is. And if you have that idea of how important that task that you're about to do is, and you have the sincere desire to cooperate, this is enough for us to begin any new task successfully. So, for those of us who sometimes feel shaky about it, just think about these two things. If you're already there at the Spiritist Center, for example, at your church, and you feel that you understand the responsibility of doing what you need to do, let's say of cleaning the Spiritist Center, cleaning the room, cleaning, washing the dishes, you know how important that is. You know that if you don't clean it, the next group of people who will use it will find the place in a big mess, for example. So you have that idea, so you know the responsibility involved. And if you really want to cooperate, then that's enough to begin this task successfully, because you will know that you will need to go all the way to the end. So it's not an excuse, right? Not to, or to be shaky, or to be with a little bit of fear of how to start. This is because of the responsibility that is involved there, that sense of responsibility that makes us fear a little bit the result. But nobody starts anything being perfect, right? The first doctors that today have, I'd say, 40 years of work, the first patient of that same doctor, he was not sure, or she was not sure how to treat them, right? But 40 years later, after doing many of these things, some the same, some struggles, some mistakes, learning with the mistakes, doing it over, restarting it over, doing it again and again, it makes us feel better, more confident, and go on and move on and progress, right? So here's the same thing. Andre is afraid, but Aniceto looks at him and says, "Hey, you're ready. Just let's go. Let's go. You're ready. You had the study. You practiced before. I know you're here. You're sincere. You want to cooperate. You know how important that this job is. You're ready to go. Let's move. Let's move." And then he says, such affirmations were encouraging. And then he goes on. At this moment, he remembers Narcisa, which is a nurse friend of him that he met in Nosolar when he was working in the Chambers of Rectification. Narcisa is a great woman. If you go back there to Nosolar, you read some things about her. They're really, really amazing. And she says here, to which you heard on Francisca's voice, right? She as if Narcisa was speaking to us, and she says, and he remembers, she's saying that the best medicine is the renewal of hope. Right? She's not saying here that you don't need medicine. No. Whatever you're given, add this renewal of hope. And then with that, a person may not, at some times, depending on how bad physically they are, improve or get completely cured or healed physically, but that renewal of hope that you give to the other person, it will make that person much, much better. If you encounter the failed and hopeless, speak to them of the divine opportunity of the future. That's giving somebody hope, right? And if you find evil spirits, devious and criminal spirits, don't curse them. Encourage, edify, educate, and awaken them without harming those who still sleep. God does wonders through deeds of goodwill, and we don't know how far our deeds of goodwill will go. So that's why we should keep doing them at all times, anytime, at any opportunity that we have. So I mentioned before that Andre took care of 5 patients. I forgot one, so it's not 1, it's not 5. It were 6 patients that he took care of. And Aniceto says, use all your abilities, Andre. With the collaboration that we are providing here, me, you, and Vicente, 3 other people, 3 other spirits, will have the opportunity of doing something else, because the more people they have, the more things they can do. So we're taking part of the job, and they are going to do something else. So it's another teaching for all of us. You look at something, right, that a person does, or that the Spirit Center does, and although it seems that everything is working fine, it seems that everything is running smoothly and perfectly, even if you feel that, if you ask one of the people who are responsible for the work, I bet that you will always hear, "Oh no, you can help here." Because if you go and do something, let's say very simple, right? Oh, just put the chairs, if you don't have those fixed chairs, right? If you have those chairs that can be moved around, if you go and fix those chairs, the position, and organize them all at the hall, for example, right? The person that usually does that will have something else to do, and they will be able to achieve much more, because a good pair of hands with a sincere desire to cooperate will always be welcomed anywhere we are. So that's what Aniceto is telling us, and by telling this to Andre Luiz, right? And Andre describes a little bit more, and he says, for example, that while looking at what the work is being done there, he remembers again Narcisa, and by what he just recounted of she speaking to him, and he remembers again that she said once that she achieved much more with love than with medication. And that's what we were talking before, right? It's not a substitute. medication for love. No. If you're taking your meds, if you're taking your medicine, don't stop taking your medicine. If the doctor said, if you trust the doctor, keep going with it. If you think it's not working, go to a different doctor. But don't stop taking the medicine just because you're going to a Spiritist center or because you're going to a church or because you spoke to somebody. Medicine is there, and God allows us to have it because we need it. I wouldn't say every single time, but we need it. But what Narcisa is saying is, what Andre is saying that Narcisa used to do is give the medicine. If you add love to the medicine, if you add love to the medication that you're giving, you will achieve much more, right? So, and of course, here they are talking about the spirit world, which will be the how can I say it? The effects will be much visible, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't work here. If you go, for example, and watch that movie Patch Adams, right, with Robin Williams, and when he plays this doctor that decides to just take care of children in a different way, just by putting a red nose, right, Dr. Red Nose, and he makes the life of children much better because he's putting there a new type of energy, a love and care for the others, instead of just giving one person 5 minutes and then, as if we are in a production center, right, and then 5 minutes to this, 5 minutes to the other one, 5 minutes to the other one, as if we are trying to rush through them, because that's not what I really want to do. So that's what Andre is doing here. If we are at the Spiritist Center, somebody wants to talk to us, why rush, right? I know that everybody has its own time. We need to go back home. We need to rest. We know all this, right? But it's interesting that we think about this idea of giving much more love than just a simple pill, as if that pill will solve or resolve the situation. It doesn't always. It can solve a physical problem right away, a pain or something, but as soon as the effect of that pill runs off, then the pain is back, and the person didn't have or doesn't have the caring, the love, the renewal of hope that we are supposed to give as Christians, as Spiritists. So Andre moves on after remembering all this, and he says that he see this deeply disheartened woman, and he says that he should help not just by resolution and energy, but also using tenderness and understanding. So here we are, right, Andre, after this whole year of renewal, and maybe a few more days or months before this specific task here starts, already using what he learned. He needs resolution, he needs energy, he needs the physicality, but he needs tenderness and understanding. And we will see how this comes into play. And he comes to the lady and says, well, let's begin with the energizing passes, to which the lady starts to cry and mentions her eyes. He had a trachoma, which is a disease on the eyes, and she wants to see it again. She wants to see it again. But Andre, feeling encouraged, says, hey, let's move on. Do you trust in the power of Jesus, right? Remember that he heals the blind and lights our pathway and guides our steps, which is very interesting. Andre remembering this, right, and remembering this to us as well, that Jesus cured the blind in the body, and what they're doing is not in the body or in the physical matter, but in the spirit world. And usually these, at least in Brazil, most of us are Christians, or at least know Jesus and knows his stories, but it is more than natural that if you find a person that, for example, is a Jew or is a Muslim, right, you will probably find much better explanations, much better examples in the life of other Jews, in the life of other Muslims to use as words of renewal. So remember, we and you don't always have to, we have to adapt and to learn to whom we are talking to so that we know what is the best pathway of what we're going to say and what examples we're going to use to help the most, right? Instead of just sticking to what my belief is, let's go meet the other at the other's belief, right? Instead of just getting closed, shelled, right, by our own trusts and beliefs and thinking that we have the best belief, that we have the best knowledge. No, it's about helping the other. It's not about us. It's about the other. And before doing the passes, right, Andre says something that's really interesting. If you heard our studies of Nosflar, you will remember most certainly that Andre was very, very curious. We made some jokes here and there because he was always asking questions. And sometimes he was asking questions at the wrong time or asking the wrong questions. And he was always, the instructors would always come to him and say, "Hey, Andre, this is not the right place. This is not the right time." And he mentions here that only later when he was remembering that situation, maybe when he was writing this, he says that he remembers that he forgot all about his unwholesome curiosity. So it's just a reminder for us, right? We need, if we want to learn, we need to be curious, right? Like children, they will come and then they will touch things. They will ask what is this, why and why and why and why, millions and millions of whys, what, and they will keep asking and asking and asking. This is necessary for us to learn. But the problem is, when does this curiosity become unwholesome? Meaning that you're intruding too much, you want to know things that is not good at that specific time, things that will be, let's say, destructive, not only to you but to the other person, because it will bring sometimes really, really bad memories, and it's hard to recover depending on how it is, what it is, and since we most certainly don't know how to deal with those memories and what exactly to say back to maybe take that person out of that darkness, for example, it can be very, very unwholesome. So it is very, very interesting that he remembers this, so that we are always checking what type of curiosity we have in our lives, especially when we are dealing with other people's lives. But he goes on and he says that not only that, but he was a doctor when he was incarnated, right? And what he's saying here is that not even that scientific approach that he used to have, he is having right now. All he said, he says, all I saw in front of me was a suffering and a needy sister. So he was not seeing that person as if that person was a disease to be treated. What he is seeing now, he's seeing a person that needs love, that needs care, that needs affection, and also that at that specific moment needs treatment. So it's the other way around. It's not a disease that needs to be expelled. It's a person that needs love, that needs care. And then at that specific moment, there's a disease involved. So we're giving love, we're giving care, we're giving attention. And if we can help, we will try to solve or at least try to minimize the physical problem or the mental problem or the psychological problem that the person has at that specific moment. And then he says that he became more and more willing to practice fraternal love, and if he could see himself in a mirror, he would probably see, and that's why he says it, a new clarity began to illuminate and warm his own face. So he's going out of himself to help the other. He's willing to practice fraternal love. It's not a robot attending to another robot. No, it's a human being. It's a sentient being, a divine being tending to another divine being, practicing fraternal love. So he goes on and remembers Jesus and begins to apply the passes, right? So he says that he's applying relieving passes over the poor woman's eyes. And then he sees that there was this layer of darkness that now is falling. So, of course, and he mentions Jesus here. So, if you want, you could go to the Gospel and find some of those passages where Jesus is curing the blind, and you'll find a few of them. But there's also a message at the Gospel according to Spiritism here, where there's this message of Vianney, the curadors, and when he gives us a message of a woman, about a woman who wanted to be cured of her blindness. And that message always struck me and still strikes me at all times, and that's why I remember it so vividly, because it is so interesting the way he says, and that fits perfectly here at this specific moment in the Messengers. And I highly recommend you to go back to the Gospel according to Spiritism and find that message by Vianney, the curadors, when he says to this young lady that wants to see again, or wants to see, that he says, well, I am not the one who cures, so we will need to ask God's permission to do something. So if I can do, it's because he wants me to do, and because the power is all his. But why do you want to see? And that's the big question. So many people, so many of us fall because we see too much. And we can go back to what Andre was saying before, because we are way too much curious. We are unwholesomely curious. So if we have something, let's just make sure that we use it for the right things, with the right intention, with the right purpose in mind, instead of falling because we have that specific thing, be it our money, be it our sight, be it our hearing. It doesn't matter. Anything we have, we can use for the good. And that's basically what it is. Andre doesn't mention this. He just goes and tries to do his best. He does his best. And she is finally able to see. And she says, I can see. God is great, God is great. So she starts by saying that God is great, right? She was a little bit afraid, but she was very happy as well. But then she kneels down right in front of Andre and to him. That's how she used to thank people when something big would happen. And then, who are you? She asks. Emissary of the good. So Andre at this moment, and I would say that we would probably feel something of the same sort as he is feeling right now. You did something, right? And that thing that you just did achieved a goal. She wanted to see now the passes were applied. Now she sees. So you accomplished something. We would probably feel the same thing. He says that he was overcome by a profound emotion that he could not suppress. God has confounded him. Who was him to heal anyone? But the joy of that woman was showing him something that he didn't want to believe, that he was not the one who healed. But once that impression, once that achievement came to him, he says, the light of that gift revealed more strongly the dark depths of my own imperfections, which is really, really great. Not that it revealed, but that he noticed that it revealed. The worst thing that could happen to us in this regard is that if we have a difficulty of doing something, but we don't know that difficulty, that vice, that problem is there. Therefore, if we don't notice, if we don't know, if we don't understand that, how will I change it? So what is very important here is that he noticed it. And then he says, tears rolled down my cheeks. He wasn't able to hold them back because he was feeling so thankful as well. He wanted to go on and help another patient, but he was so much into himself at that moment, maybe congratulating himself, maybe astonished by what just happened, that he was stuck there. But he recognizes that he had these own imperfections to which Aniceto, and Aniceto is connected to at least very much to two of those spirits, Andre and Vicente. So he is watching everything and he's aware of what's going on. When he notices that Andre is in that state, he approaches Andre politely, says in a low voice, and this is very, very important to us. Andre, too much regard for results can jeopardize the worker. Why are we at the Spiritus Center? Of course, we want to see results, right? If we're doing something and it doesn't show results, we don't know if it's working. And then, of course, we need to have a regard for results. What Aniceto is saying here, however, is not that we don't and that we can't have regard for results. No, we need to keep looking for them. What he is saying is, be balanced. Too much regard for results can jeopardize. And that's what we are usually waiting and expecting from other people. And sometimes even from what we do. We don't know the results. We don't know when, where, and how those results will come. Sometimes we teach for years before we can see a result in somebody. Let's think about ourselves. How many times have we heard the teachings and the lessons of Jesus? Are we already practicing everything that he wants us to do? Everything that we learned so far? Are we practicing? If he was expecting results, I guess, as of right now, he would have given up on us, because sometimes, although I believe and I can see that we are much, much better than we were before in other times, in other moments in our history, but sometimes we look at our world and say, how come we have gone so far in destroying so many lives, in doing so many bad things? If Jesus were expecting immediate results or having too much regard for results, for immediate results, he would have given up and we would probably be alone, a small dust grain flying around in the universe without nobody looking for us. So why do we have too much regard for results? Because when we have it, and that's what just happened to Andre, vanity usually awakens within us. Because if we see that something just happened, that we did, that vanity will come. Hey, I can do it. I did it. And then it makes us forget the Lord. Don't forget, Aniceto tells us, that all good comes from Him, comes from the Lord. He is the light of our hearts. We are His instruments in the tasks of love. A servant is not one who is amazed by the results, or the one who gets wrapped up in contemplating the results. A faithful servant is that person that can fulfill the Lord's divine will and then move on. Why is it so important what Aniceto is telling us here? Because of both ways that this can go. First, and in this first case that just happened to Andre, he was able to get the person cured. She couldn't see, now she sees. So he was able to achieve that. But what if it doesn't happen like we were talking before? So either one, it will grow in me vanity if I get all the results immediately. And if I don't get the results, I can be turned down and leave the job, leave the task, and not become a faithful servant. So the faithful servant is one who fulfills the Lord's divine will, which is to love, care, practice fraternal love to everybody, and then move on. It is not for us, right? I can plant the seed, but the seed has to have a power of its own to grow. It's not on us. We can help, but it's not on us, right? We do our part. That's what Aniceto is telling us here. But then they move on. Aniceto goes on to treat other spirits, and Andre continues his work. And then he looks at her, at the lady who just asked, right? Who are you? Who are you who did this to me? Who are you, emissary of the good? And he says, my friend, don't thank me. Thank Jesus. I am just a servant. You don't want to know me. It doesn't matter who I am. See, now you're seeing. But instead of looking just to the outside, turn your visual power inward. And that will come back. That will make me go back to what I just mentioned a few minutes ago about that message on the Gospel according to Spiritism. That's exactly the same thing that Vianney, the Cure d'Ars, says to that girl who asks him to cure her from her blindness. Oh, how powerful would that be if you that cannot see the exterior world and cannot be distracted by those things from the exterior world could look inside yourself and see the profoundness that God gave you and how powerful you are to become a better person. So if you look inside, just like Andre is saying here, consecrate the sublime gift of sight to the Lord of life. So if you see, and now we are speaking here one to the other, me and you, if you can see, take some time to look inside. And you're telling me, Mackenzie, if you can see, and I can see, although I wear glasses, but I can see, Mackenzie, look inside yourself. Turn your visual power inward. That's what Andre is telling us, telling all of us. She's telling that lady. We don't know her name. We don't know who she is. We don't know what happened after that. But that lesson stuck. That lesson is powerful and very, very important to all of us. Let's look inside. Let's use our visual power on ourselves, not to notice other people's imperfections, but to see ours, and then make the effort to change. Apparently, the lady doesn't like what he said that much, but he just moved on. He says it, and then he moves on. And he will go to treat unfortunate brother, had cancer. Then he met two other people, and then he says the boroughs in Rio, right, or districts in Rio, where these spirits came from: Encantado, Piedade, and Olaria. These three districts, and he attended 4 people, two people that had tuberculosis, another woman who had cancer or malignant tumor, and another young man who had passed away from during surgery. He was doing surgery. The first one that he treated, the woman, he was able to, quote unquote here, heal her, or of what she wanted, right? She didn't see, now she can see. The second man, the second person, he applied some passes, and the man says that he began to feel better. But the 4 last, right? Those 4, at the end, he says, none of them showed any signs of relief. Their organic ailments and the accompanying psychic phenomena of suffering persisted. Out of 6, 1 was healed of what she was expecting. The other one got better, but 4 of them, there was no signs of relief. Remember what we were talking about before? Don't show too much regard for results. You will be able to treat some. You will be able to heal, to have a good result in some. But you can be turned down on the cases that you won't be able to do anything, or apparently you won't be able to do anything. So when his task ended, Aniceto comes. He goes to meet Aniceto and Vicente. They were waiting for him. And Aniceto comes, looks at him and says, and I'm going to read and I'm going to quote because this is very important and will actually wrap it up, this idea that we were discussing. The activities of assistance always proceed just as you have observed here. Some, this is important, some feel that they are healed, while others say they've at least improved. But most seem to continue unreceptive to the aid they have received. See, some they are healed and say that they are at least improved. But most seem to continue the same way they were before. 4 out of 6 were exactly like they were before, underdid something. 2 were better. So that's what Aniceto says. It's always like this. And by our experience, it's the same thing. Because it's not for us to do everything. We do our best, but we don't solve every single problem. We can improve in helping, but not everybody will get better because it doesn't depend only on us. That's how Aniceto finalizes this topic. What should interest us, however, is the sowing of the good. We need to go and plant. We need to sow the good. However, the germination, growth, blossom, and fruit belong to the Lord. We sow the seed, but it's not for us to germinate, to grow, and to blossom, and to fruit that seed. The seed is not ours anymore. The seed is on the other. And this belongs to God. So that's why we cannot have too much regard for results. We can do our best. We should do our best. We must do our best when planting the seeds. But the seeds, they must do what they need to do to grow. And of course, I would assume that they would look at Aniceto in awe and keep looking at him and thinking just like I am right now of how powerful that teaching is to our lives. But Vicente looks deeply impressed and remarks, "Oh, how many spirits we see. How many disturbed spirits we see. It's so frightening to see this amount of disturbed spirits." Aniceto smiles and says, in a serious tone, and we are getting at the end of tonight's chapter, when he says, and I'm going to quote the whole thing again, because it is very powerful. Quote, "We owe the overwhelming percentage of such afflictions to the lack of proper religious education. But I'm not referring to the kind that comes from a priest or the mouth of one person to the ears of another. I am referring to the inner and profound religious education that people systematically deny themselves." When Aniceto tells this, and we were talking before that when we want to go meet another person, when we go to help another person, and we lock ourselves up in our education, in our religion, and we don't approach the other, it means that I am at that kind of religious organization, but that I still didn't understand what to be religious is. I read this sentence the other day, that if our religion makes us hate somebody, maybe it's time for us to rethink the way I understand that religion. Because to be religious is to love. Most than any other thing is to love everybody. But unfortunately, sometimes we are so stuck within ourselves, within our core system of belief, that we cannot look at the outside with a loving eye, with a merciful eye. God is all mercy. God is all love. Hopefully we are. When we say that we are religious, hopefully we are not saying that, oh, I'm religious because I go to the Spiritus Center, or not only because I go to the Spiritus Center. Hopefully we already noticed that I don't need to say that I am this or I am that to be a religious person. To be a religious person is to walk the talk. Do what I am saying. If I read a good book and that has a good message, good examples, follow and live by those examples. And educate ourselves religiously. I hope that that's what we are doing with our own lives. And at the same time, I hope that you will, together with me, with Francisca, be back here next week for another chapter of the messengers in our home. Have a great week, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.